I woke up to a sound I'll never forget. At first it was faint, like someone dragging their nails across rough wood. Slow, deliberate, almost testing. I lay there in the dark, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, or maybe a loose branch brushing against the cabin wall. But then it came again, this time sharper. 3 quick scrapes, followed by silence so heavy I could hear my heartbeat echoing inside my ears. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something is listening back. I reached over for my flashlight, trying not to make a sound. The cabin was freezing, every exhale turning into mist in front of my face. I waited, counting the seconds. Nothing. No footsteps, no animals outside, just that awful, still quiet. Finally, I forced myself to get up. My hands shook so bad the flashlight beam danced all over the room. When I turned it toward the door, I froze. 3 long, jagged marks ran straight across the wood, deep enough to cut through the outer layer and splinter the frame. The edges were fresh, clean, like whatever made them had claws sharp enough to slice through solid oak. I thought it had to be a bear, but when I stepped outside the next morning, the snow around the cabin was untouched. No prints, no trails, nothing. Just those claw marks, and the uneasy feeling that whoever or whatever left them might come back. I know what you're probably thinking. Claw marks on a door in the middle of the Utah mountains? Sounds like one of those campfire stories, right? That's what I thought too, until I realized these mountains have a history, one that goes way beyond bears or mountain lions. Hey, I'm Mendlin, and on this channel, I dive into real encounters that blur the line between folklore and reality. What you're about to hear isn't a story I read somewhere, it's something I lived through. And after I started digging into what the locals believe about these mountains, I started to wish I hadn't gone looking for answers at all. The cabin sat near the base of the Wasatch Mountains, about an hour past the last gas station. Tucked so deep in the forest that by the time you lose cell service, you're already surrounded by snow and silence. It wasn't supposed to be an adventure. I just wanted a quiet weekend away, a chance to clear my head, finish a bit of work, maybe catch the sunrise over the peaks. But there's something about those mountains. They don't feel empty, not the way mountains usually do. Even in daylight, there's this strange awareness in the air, like the forest is holding its breath and watching you back. During the day, it's stunning. Pine trees that stretch like cathedral spires, the sound of meltwater trickling down hidden creeks, the kind of crisp cold that stings your nose but feels clean. But once the sun dips behind the ridges, everything changes. The colors drain out of the forest, and every shadow starts to move just a little too long. The wind sounds almost intentional, carrying faint, broken tones that sometimes sound like whispers, sometimes like laughter. When I first mentioned to the locals where I was staying, they just gave me this look. One older guy at the supply store told me, "People who stay out there overnight either come back different or don't come back at all." I laughed it off, of course. He said something about the old watchers in the woods, some local legend I didn't really catch at the time. I figured he was just trying to spook an outsider. But as the nights went on, I started to understand why people here still tell those stories, even in 2025. There's an old kind of fear that clings to these mountains, the kind that doesn't need proof to feel real. The first night passed quietly enough, or at least, I think it did. Out there, the silence plays tricks on you. You start hearing things that might not even be real, a twig snapping somewhere in the dark, the low groan of the trees shifting in the wind. But it was the second night when things started feeling off. I was sitting by the fireplace reading when I heard it, a dull thud from outside, like something heavy landing in the snow. I froze, waiting. Another thud, then a dragging sound, slow, uneven, like something being pulled across the ground. I got up, stepped toward the window and aimed my flashlight out into the trees. Nothing. just the beam catching flakes of snow and the faint outline of the tree line. But the sound stopped the moment the light hit. Completely stopped. I tried to shrug it off, told myself it was probably a deer, or maybe a branch sliding off the roof under the snow's weight. But that excuse didn't hold up for long. The next morning I found tracks behind the cabin, except they didn't look like any animal I've ever seen. Not paw prints, not boots, not even tire marks. They were long, thin impressions, almost like fingers pressing into the snow, and there were only 3 per set. I even pulled up a wildlife tracking guide on my phone. Bears, cougars, elk, nothing matched. The closest thing I found was a mountain lion print, but these were narrower, deeper, and the spacing between them, it didn't make sense. Whatever it was would have had to be walking on 2 legs. That night, it got stranger. Around midnight, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the back wall of the cabin. Not random, rhythmic. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone was counting out time. I walked around the cabin's edge with the flashlight again, and I swear, for half a second, I saw movement between the trees. Tall. Too tall. Just a silhouette against the snow. There 1 second, gone the next. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down I knew. Something was out there, watching, waiting. That third night, I couldn't sleep. Every gust of wind outside sounded like footsteps in the snow, and every creak of the cabin made my stomach twist. Around 2 in the morning, I decided to make some coffee, anything to stay awake. That's when I heard it again. The scraping. The same slow, deliberate drag across the wooden door. The one sound I'd hoped was just in my head. But this time, it wasn't faint. It was right there, inches away from where I was standing. I froze. The kettle stopped mid-whistle, and for a moment, the only sound in the cabin was my own breathing. I wanted to look, but part of me was terrified of what I'd see. Then came a knock. 3 sharp, heavy thuds against the door. Not random, like someone testing the wood. I reached for my flashlight again, hands shaking, my mind scrambling for logic. Bears don't knock. Wind doesn't scrape like that. I took a deep breath and flicked the beam toward the door. And then I saw them. 3 claw marks, deep, dark grooves torn straight through the wood, running diagonally from top to bottom. The edges were splintered, and in the light I could see something darker clinging to the cuts, almost like dried resin or blood. My whole body went cold. I stepped back slowly, trying not to make a sound. The air inside the cabin felt different, thicker somehow, heavier, like the atmosphere itself was waiting for something. Then came another sound, from the far side of the cabin, a low, guttural breath. Not animal, not human. It was long, deep, and wet, like air being forced through something that shouldn't be breathing. I killed the flashlight instantly, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo. Whatever was outside, it was circling the cabin now. Slow, deliberate steps crunching in the snow, one after another. I stood there in the dark, gripping a fireplace poker like it would make any difference. The footsteps stopped right by the window, and then, nothing. Just silence. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I don't remember. When I finally dared to move again, I waited for the first trace of daylight to creep in before I even thought about opening that door. The claw marks were still there, fresh, and deep enough that when I pressed my fingers into them, splinters came loose. But the strangest part, the snow outside the door was untouched. No tracks, no prints, not even a sign that anything had ever been there. Just those marks, carved clean through solid wood, and the feeling that whatever did it hadn't gone far. The next morning, I went straight into town. There was no way I was staying another night in that cabin until I figured out what was going on. I showed a few locals pictures of the claw marks. Some just shrugged. Others told me to call wildlife control. But one man, maybe in his 60s, stared at the photo for a long time without saying a word. Then he asked quietly, "You were up by Mill Creek Ridge, weren't you?" When I nodded, he sighed and said, "You should have listened when they told you not to stay past dark." I asked him what he meant, and that's when he told me something I can't forget. According to him, the old-timers up here still talk about a creature, something they call the Watcher of the Ridge. They say it isn't an animal, but an echo, a spirit that lingers where the mountain once claimed lives. Miners, hikers, travelers who disappeared without a trace. The story goes that the Watcher doesn't show itself unless someone stays where they shouldn't, unless you've disturbed something sacred or old. It leaves marks, not as an attack but as a warning. 3 marks to mean, leave while you still can. I thought it was just folklore. Every place has its ghost stories, right? But then I started digging deeper. Back at the cabin, I found a collection of local folklore archived online. Stories recorded by students from Utah State University back in the 1970s. And there it was. Several accounts from the Wasatch and Uintas mentioning door scratches, no tracks, and the watchers in the snow. One entry even described a man who claimed to have seen a tall, human-shaped shadow following him through the trees. He said it mimicked his movements, every step, every turn, until he ran. The next morning, he found 3 deep gashes carved into the side of his tent. That's when I realized my experience wasn't unique. Whatever had left those marks on my door had been seen before, for decades, maybe longer. I wanted to believe it was just stories, but the more I read, the more impossible that became. Because some of these reports came from park rangers, loggers, and campers who didn't even know about the folklore. People who'd just come back saying the same thing. No tracks, just claw marks. After hearing all those stories, I couldn't bring myself to stay another night. I packed my things as soon as I got back to the cabin, threw everything into the truck and left before sunset. I told myself it was the smart thing to do. Logical, safe. But a few days later, I couldn't stop thinking about those claw marks. So I went back. It was mid-afternoon when I got there. Bright sunlight, blue sky, nothing threatening at all. But when I stepped up to the cabin door, my stomach dropped. The marks were still there. Only now, they were deeper. Fresh shavings of wood littered the ground below. Someone, or something, had come back. The snow was still untouched. No footprints, no tire tracks, not even a sign of an animal. Just those 3 gashes, darker than before, as if whatever made them wanted to make sure I'd notice. I didn't stay long. I snapped one last photo, locked the cabin, and left for good. But even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that I didn't really leave it behind. Every once in a while, when I wake up late at night, I catch myself listening, waiting for that same scraping sound. And sometimes, I swear I hear it. Faint, slow, just enough to make me wonder if the Watcher found another way to follow me home. For a while, I tried to explain it away. Maybe it really was a bear, a young one passing through, drawn by the smell of food. Maybe the claw marks just look deeper in the cold light of morning. But every time I look at that photo, those explanations feel thinner and thinner. Bears don't walk around cabins without leaving tracks. They don't scratch once, leave, and come back days later to deepen the same marks. And they definitely don't knock 3 times before doing it. I've shown the pictures to a few people since then. Wildlife trackers, even a park ranger, and none of them could identify it for sure. One of them just stared for a long time and said, "If you were up in those mountains, you're lucky it only marked the door. Maybe that's all it was. A coincidence, a trick of the light, an animal that just happened to move in a way no animal does. Or maybe the old stories have some truth to them. Maybe there really are things in those mountains that remember who trespasses and warn them not to come back. I don't know what I saw, but I do know this. When the forest goes completely quiet, no wind, no birds, no sound at all, that's not peace. That's a warning." I haven't been back to that cabin since, The owner ended up sealing it off for the winter, and part of me hopes the snow will cover those marks for good. But part of me wonders if covering them would even matter. Because whatever's out there in the Utah mountains, whatever left those 3 deep gashes on my door, it didn't want to be seen. It just wanted me to know it was there. If you've ever had something like that happen, something you can't explain, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where it happened, what you saw, what you felt. And if you're from Utah, maybe you've heard your own version of this legend, the Watcher of the Ridge. There's a reason people still whisper about it. And maybe, if we start piecing these stories together, we'll finally figure out what's been walking those mountains after dark. Until then, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and if you ever hear that slow, scraping sound in the middle of the night, whatever you do, don't open the door.